So let's talk about the incredible journey of astronaut Scott Kelly. How does a kid who can barely focus in school end up commanding the International Space Station? Well, it turns out the lessons he learned on his way up are just as profound as the journey itself.
And this quote right here, it really gets to the heart of his entire story's perspective. What his journey teaches us is that changing how you see yourself and the world around you can literally change everything.
I mean, just look at this. How does that kid, a C student who can't sit still, become that guy, the commander of the most complex machine humans have ever built? It seems totally impossible, right? Today, we're going to unpack exactly what happened in between. To really get how he made that climb, we have to start at the very bottom, because his journey started with absolutely no direction at all. From a really early age, Scott was that kid. You know the type. Couldn't sit still, mind was always somewhere else. He daydreamed, he got into a bit of trouble, and he just barely scraped by. He had no plan, no ambition, and no clue he was dealing with ADD. He was just adrift. But there was this incredibly powerful influence in his life. His mother. This quote just says it all about her. She was a police officer, and she taught him by doing. You don't just sit around and wait for somebody else to fix your problems. You get out there, you figure it out, and you get it done. That little seed of tenacity, it was planted early. But that seed of tenacity, that grit, it needed something to grow towards. And this brings us to the big turning point. The moment this completely directionless kid found the one thing he was missing, a mission. So picture this. He's in college, still totally unfocused, and on a whim, he just walks into the campus bookstore. He picks up this book, The Right Stuff, about the first American astronauts, these test pilots who were pushing the absolute limits of what was possible. And for the first time in his life, something just clicked. And what's so interesting is what The Right Stuff came to mean to him. It wasn't about being some kind of hero. It was about seeing these people channel every ounce of their energy into an incredibly difficult goal. And he realized, that's it. That's what I need. A really, really hard problem to solve. And being an astronaut, that became his problem. But inspiration is one thing, but actually doing the work is something else entirely. In this timeline, it just shows you the long, hard road that was ahead of him. That moment in the bookstore was 1982. It took 14 years of pure grinding, learning how to study, getting an engineering degree, becoming a Navy test pilot, before NASA finally selected him. So, how on earth did he do it? How do you even begin to tackle a goal as massive as become an astronaut? Well, he developed a system, a way of thinking that, honestly, we can all learn from. And it comes down to this. You have to sweat the small stuff. Here's his 3-step playbook for taming complexity. Instead of getting paralyzed by this giant, scary goal, like fly the space shuttle, he would break it all the way down. What's the very next thing I have to do? Pass this one test, nail this one simulation. He literally trained his brain to ignore the overwhelming future and focus completely on the task right in front of him. And this mindset wasn't developed in some comfortable office. It was forged in the most unforgiving environment you can possibly imagine. Because in space, a loose screw or a misread gauge, that isn't a small mistake. During a mission on the Russian Mir space station, a fire actually broke out. It was a terrifying life-or-death event that just hammered this lesson home with brutal clarity. Focusing on every single detail became a survival strategy. Look, you can't control everything that might happen, but you absolutely can control your attention to the task right in front of you. And that focus, practiced over and over and over again, is what gets you from Earth to orbit. But here's the thing. He wasn't alone up there, not by a long shot. And this brings us to another critical lesson. Spaceflight is not about one hero. It is the ultimate team sport. And it requires a level of collaboration that most of us can barely even wrap our heads around. On the International Space Station, these aren't just nice corporate buzzwords you see on a poster. These are literal rules for survival. Any ambiguity in communication, it could be fatal. Having an ego, fatal. Not trusting your crewmates or the thousands of people on the ground, totally fatal. The mission is everything, period. Just think about that for a second. Your actual life is in the hands of engineers in Houston, in Moscow, in Tokyo, people whose faces you will never, ever see. That's the level of trust and interdependence we're talking about. It's a profound lesson in humility and, really, in shared purpose. And all of this brings us to the final and honestly the most transformative lesson of all. It's why that first quote is so powerful. It's about what happens to your mind when you actually leave the world behind. Scott Kelly holds the American record for the longest single space flight. For almost a full year, his window looked out onto our entire planet, just spinning below. I mean, what does that do to a person? Well, it's called the orbital perspective, or sometimes the overview effect. From 250 miles up, you don't see a map of countries. You see Earth as this single interconnected living system. You see that thin, shimmering blue line of the atmosphere, and you realize just how unbelievably fragile it all is. And suddenly, all the things that divide us down here, they just seem so insignificant. The wars, the politics, the borders, they all just vanish. What you feel, Kelly says, is this overwhelming connection, not to a country, but to a species. All of us, living together on this one beautiful, vulnerable planet. And this is his ultimate takeaway. This is his big hope, that this perspective, which for so long was reserved for just a handful of people, can become more widespread. Because maybe seeing our world from the outside is exactly what we need to figure out how to live better together on the inside. So, we'll end with this question for you. You don't have to go to space to find a new perspective. What if you could just step back and see your own challenges, your own disagreements, from a distance? What would change if you chose to see the bigger picture? That's the powerful lesson Scott Kelly brought back home to Earth for all of us.